The sound of Jessica's designer heels clicking against the marble floor echoed through the hallway of Morgan Industries headquarters. I kept my eyes focused on my computer screen, pretending to be absorbed in spreadsheets as she approached my desk. Well, what used to be my office before she demoted me to executive assistant. "Olivia, where are the Q3 projections?" she demanded, not bothering with a greeting. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes. I reached for a perfectly organized folder on my desk. "Right here. I've also included the updated market analysis you asked for, plus the preliminary numbers from our Asian division." She snatched the folder without a word of thanks, flipping through it with manicured fingers. At 32, Jessica Morgenstern was everything I wasn't: tall, polished, and married to one of the most influential tech investors in Silicon Valley. The fact that she was my stepsister seemed almost irrelevant now. "These better be accurate," she muttered. Unlike last time, I bit back a retort. Last time had been her error, not mine, but there was no point arguing. Not anymore. "My name is Olivia Morgan, and until 6 months ago, I was the chief operating officer of Morgan Industries, the technology consulting firm my father had built from nothing. I'd worked my way up from intern to COO over 12 years, learning every aspect of the business while earning my MBA at night, but none of that mattered after Dad's stroke. Jessica had swooped in with her husband James's connections and her mother's influence over our father. Suddenly, the succession plan that had been in place for years disappeared. Instead of me taking over as CEO, the board appointed Jessica, despite her having spent the last decade working in fashion marketing. "Oh, and cancel my lunch with the Riverside team," Jessica added, already turning away. "I have a more important meeting. They've flown in from London specifically to meet with you." I reminded her. "The acquisition dash." I said, "Cancel it." Her voice could have frozen hell itself. "And remember your place, Olivia. You're not COO anymore, you're just the help." As she clicked away down the hall, I allowed myself a small smile. Jessica was so convinced of her own superiority that she never bothered to look closely at what I was actually doing with all those spreadsheets and reports. She had no idea that for the past year, ever since I first noticed her maneuvering for control, I'd been preparing for this exact situation. Later that evening, I sat in my small home office, surrounded by documents that told a very different story than the one Jessica thought she knew. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Zhang, our former head of Asia-Pacific operations, who'd retired shortly after Jessica took over. "Everything's ready. Tokyo team is on board." I sent back a thumbs-up emoji, then opened my laptop to check the secure email account I'd set up months ago. One by one, confirmation messages rolled in from key personnel across Morgan Industries' global offices, people Jessica had dismissed as irrelevant, middle managers she never bothered to meet. People who had watched me grow up in this company, who remembered how I'd started in the mailroom during summer breaks, people who'd seen me work alongside them, learning their challenges, understanding their value. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I quickly closed the laptop before calling out, "Come in." It was David Chin, Jessica's husband, James's younger brother, and ironically, one of my closest allies. "Rough day?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. Unlike his brother and sister-in-law, David had earned everything he had through hard work and genuine talent. I shrugged. "The usual. Your sister-in-law continues to excel at alienating our most important clients. She canceled the Riverside meeting?" "How did you know?" David smiled grimly. "Because she scheduled lunch with Patterson Holdings instead. James arranged it. They're planning to push through some major restructuring." My heart skipped a beat. Patterson Holdings was known for aggressive cost-cutting and outsourcing. If they were involved. How soon? 2 weeks. They're going to announce a strategic partnership that will effectively give Patterson control of Morgan's domestic operations. David leaned forward, his expression serious. "A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, Olivia." I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "Then we need to move faster. Is everything set on your end?" David had been helping me set up Aurora Consulting, officially a small startup focusing on specialized tech consulting, but actually the vehicle for something much bigger. "The infrastructure is ready," he confirmed. "We can go live whenever you give the word. But are you sure about this? Once we start, we can't go back." I finished. "I know, but Jessica and James have left us no choice. They're going to destroy everything my father built, all in the name of short-term profits." I opened my laptop again, showing him the messages I'd received. "We're not the only ones who see it coming. The question is, are you really willing to go against your own brother?" David's face hardened. James stopped being my brother the moment he decided to use Morgan Industries as his personal piggy bank. "I'm with you all the way." The next morning, I arrived at work early, just like always. Jessica might have demoted me, but she still relied on me to keep things running smoothly, which meant I had access to everything: client contacts, project details, internal communications. I was reviewing the morning reports when my phone buzzed. It was Marcus again. Singapore office is secure, regional directors all confirmed, another piece falling into place. While Jessica had been focused on impressing the board with surface-level changes, I'd spent the past year quietly building relationships with our international teams. They'd watched in dismay as she dismantled the company culture Dad had created, replacing experience with cronies and cost-cutting measures. Now they were ready to jump ship, but not to Patterson Holdings. The next week passed in a blur of careful preparation. During the day, I played the perfect assistant, managing Jessica's schedule and handling the endless details she couldn't be bothered with. At night, I coordinated with David and our growing network of allies. The plan was complex but elegant. Morgan Industries' strength had always been its people, the relationships we'd built, the expertise we'd developed. Jessica saw them as expenses to be cut. I saw them as the foundation of something new. It all came to a head sooner than we expected. Jessica burst into the office one morning, her face flushed with anger. "Where's the Singapore team's proposal for the Chintech merger? I need it for the board meeting this afternoon." I blinked innocently. "I sent it to your email last night. Didn't you receive it?" She grabbed my keyboard, pulling up her email. "There's nothing here. This is exactly why I demoted you. You can't handle basic tasks." "That's strange," I said calmly, opening my own email. "I have the confirmation receipt right here. See? Sent at 9:47 p.m. to your private email address." Jessica's face went pale. She'd been using a private email account to communicate with Patterson Holdings, keeping the negotiations off Morgan's servers. She'd never told me about it, but I'd known for months. "How did you?" "Oh, that reminds me," I continued, still in my helpful assistant voice. "Marcus Zhang asked me to give you a message." "Marcus? He retired months ago." I smiled. "Actually, he didn't. He's been quite busy setting up Aurora Consulting's Asia-Pacific headquarters, along with most of our senior team in Singapore, Tokyo, and Seoul." The blood drained from Jessica's face as understanding dawned. "What have you done?" "Me? I'm just the help, remember? I just handle the paperwork. Like the resignation letters from our entire international management team, which should be hitting the board's inboxes right about." Her phone buzzed, then again, and again. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I already have." I stood up, gathering my things. "Oh, and you might want to take a look at the client list for the Patterson Holdings deal. You'll find it's gotten significantly shorter over the past few weeks." As I walked toward the elevator, I heard her screaming for security, but it was too late. The pieces I'd spent a year putting into place were already moving. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part. The next morning, Morgan Industries headquarters was in chaos. Security guards stood at every entrance, checking IDs against a hastily compiled list of approved employees. Jessica had spent the night trying to contain the damage, but she was fighting a battle that had already been lost. I watched it unfold from Aurora Consulting's new offices, a modern workspace in a building just 3 blocks away. David had secured the lease months ago, and we'd been quietly setting up infrastructure while Jessica was focused on her Patterson Holdings deal. "Latest count?" I asked as Marcus Zhang walked into my office, looking tired but satisfied. 87% of our international staff have confirmed their transitions to Aurora," he reported. "The rest will probably follow once they see we're operational. But that's not the biggest news." He handed me his tablet, showing an email chain. "The Riverside team? After Jessica cancelled their meeting, they reached out to their contacts in our London office. They want to talk to us instead." I smiled, remembering Jessica's dismissal of that unimportant meeting. "Set it up. And make sure David is there. His technical expertise will be crucial." The phone on my desk buzzed. My assistant's voice came through the speaker. "Your father is here." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen Dad since his stroke 6 months ago. Jessica and her mother had made sure of that, controlling his visitors and protecting him from stress. "Send him in." He looked older than I remembered, leaning more heavily on his cane, but his eyes were sharp as ever as he took in my new office. "Nice view," he said mildly. "Dad." He held up a hand, stopping me. "Jessica came to see me last night. She had quite a story to tell about betrayal and corporate espionage." I stayed silent, waiting. "She seemed to think you'd stolen the company's international division right out from under her." He settled into the chair across from my desk. "What she failed to mention was how you did it." "Everything was legal," I said carefully, The employees who left chose to do so voluntarily. The clients who followed were free to take their business wherever they wanted. Oh, I know that. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. What I want to know is how long you've been planning this. I took a deep breath. Since the day I found Jessica's mother altering your succession plans while you were still in the hospital. His expression darkened. Ah, I wondered about that. I saw what was coming, Dad. I knew once they got control, they'd start dismantling everything you built. The Patterson Holdings deal was just the beginning. Patterson Holdings? He sat up straighter. Charles Patterson's Vulture Fund? I nodded, pulling up the details on my laptop. Jessica and James arranged to sell them controlling interest in Morgan's domestic operations. They were planning to gut the company, layoffs, outsourcing, selling off divisions for quick profits. Dad was silent for a long moment, studying the documents. Finally, he looked up at me with something like pride in his eyes. So instead of fighting them directly, you built a lifeboat, preserved the most valuable parts of the company, the people, the relationships, the expertise, just moved it all somewhere new. I learned from the best, I said softly. You always told me the real value of a business isn't in its assets or contracts, it's in its people. He reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You did good, kid. Now, tell me about this Aurora Consulting. I might know some people who'd be interested in working with a company like that. Over the next few weeks, the full impact of what we'd done became clear. Without its international teams and key technical staff, Morgan Industries couldn't deliver on many of its existing contracts. The Patterson Holdings deal fell apart when they realized how much value had evaporated overnight. Jessica was furious. Of course, she tried everything: lawsuits, smear campaigns, even attempted to freeze Dad out of the company completely. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. Dad might have stepped down as CEO, but he still controlled a significant portion of voting shares. And he wasn't happy about the Patterson Holdings deal. The board meeting that followed was brutal. Dad walked in supported by his cane and 3 different attorneys. By the time he walked out, Jessica had been removed as CEO, and James's board seat was under review for conflict of interest. I wasn't there. I was too busy in a video conference with our new Tokyo office, working out details for a major contract, but David recorded the whole thing on his phone. You should have seen her face, he told me later, when Dad started listing all the ways she'd violated her fiduciary duties. It was beautiful. But the real satisfaction came 2 months later, when the dust had settled. Aurora Consulting had not only survived its dramatic birth, it was thriving. Our small startup had offices in 6 countries, a client list that included some of the biggest names in tech, and a corporate culture that put people first. Morgan Industries, meanwhile, was struggling to rebuild. The board appointed an interim CEO and began the long process of damage control. They even approached me about returning, offering my old position and more. I declined politely. That chapter of my life was closed. Then came the day Jessica showed up at my office. She looked different. The designer outfit was the same, but something in her bearing had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. You won, she said without preamble. Congratulations. I gestured for her to sit. This wasn't about winning, Jessica. It was about protecting what Dad built, the real heart of it, not just the name and the buildings. By stealing it all away? There was a hint of her old bitterness. By giving people a choice, I corrected. They chose to leave because you and James showed them exactly what you thought of them, that they were just expenses to be cut, obstacles to your grand plans. She was quiet for a moment, looking out at the view of the city. James left. You know, when the Patterson deal fell apart, he moved on to his next target. Apparently, I'm not useful to him anymore. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy. I'm sorry. No, you're not. But there was no heat in her words. You saw who he really was long before I did. Just like you saw what we were going to do to the company. So what will you do now? She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression. I don't know. Everything I thought I wanted, it all turned out to be hollow. I considered her for a moment. You know, we're expanding our marketing division. Someone with your experience in fashion and luxury brands could be valuable. She stared at me. You're offering me a job? After everything? I'm offering you a chance to earn something on your own merits. No shortcuts, no political games, just honest work with a team that values real contribution. Why would you do that? I thought about Dad, about all the lessons he'd taught me about business and life. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies, it's about showing them a better way. Jessica left without accepting the offer, but I knew she'd be back. She had seen what we were building at Aurora, something based on trust, expertise, and mutual respect, something worth being part of. A year later, Aurora Consulting had become one of the fastest-growing tech consulting firms in the industry. We maintained our core values even as we expanded, never forgetting the lessons that had led to our creation. Jessica did eventually join us, starting in a junior position and working her way up honestly for the first time in her life. She turned out to have real talent when she stopped looking for shortcuts. Dad divided his time between advisory roles at both companies, helping Morgan Industries rebuild while supporting Aurora's growth. He never said "I told you so" about Jessica and James, but the pride in his eyes when he looked at what we'd built at Aurora said everything. As for me, I kept the nameplate from my old executive assistant desk. It sits in my office at Aurora, a reminder that sometimes the best view of what's really happening comes from the place where everyone underestimates you. Because in the end, Jessica had been right about one thing: I was just the help. I had helped build something new from the ashes of her destruction. I had helped save jobs and preserve relationships that took years to build. I had helped create a company that reflected the values I believed in. And sometimes, that's the best revenge of all. The wine glass shattered against the kitchen floor, red liquid seeping into the grout lines like blood. I stood frozen, watching James stuff designer shirts into his leather weekend bag as if he hadn't just detonated our entire life together. "Ashley?" I repeated, my voice oddly calm. "Your assistant Ashley? The one you said was just an eager intern?" He didn't even look up, just kept methodically packing. "She understands me, Rebecca. She sees my potential, doesn't try to hold me back like you do. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and after 15 years of marriage, my husband was leaving me for a 23-year-old who still lived with roommates and called herself an aspiring influencer on Instagram." "Hold you back?" I laughed, but it came out hollow. "I supported you through law school, helped you build your practice from nothing. How exactly did I hold you back?" James finally looked up, his handsome face twisted into something I didn't recognize. "By being so damn perfect all the time. The successful investment banker who never makes mistakes. Do you know how suffocating that is?" I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time in months. The expensive new clothes, the gym membership he suddenly couldn't live without, the late nights at the office that never quite added up. All the signs had been there, I just hadn't wanted to see them. "And the trust fund?" I asked quietly. "The one we built together?" His smile turned smug. "Already taken care of. Had the papers drawn up last week. Technically, as managing partner of the firm, I had every right to protect our assets. The trust fund, $12 million we'd accumulated over 15 years of careful investing, smart career moves, and sacrifices." My stomach churned as I thought about all those nights I'd stayed late at the office, all the vacations we'd postponed, the family we'd put off starting because we were building something together. Or so I'd thought. "You can't just take it," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew he could. James was a corporate lawyer, he knew exactly how to manipulate the system. He zipped up his bag with a flourish. "Actually, I can." And I did. "Don't worry though, I left you enough to get by. Consider it a parting gift." I watched him stride toward the door of our penthouse apartment, designer bag in hand, looking every bit the successful lawyer about to start his exciting new life. He paused at the threshold, turning back with that practiced courtroom smile. "Oh, and Rebecca? Ashley and I are getting married in June. She's always dreamed of a summer wedding." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone in the pristine kitchen I'd redesigned just last year, alone with the shattered wine glass, the seeping stain, and the knowledge that my husband of 15 years had just walked out on me. But here's what James didn't know, what his legal expertise and inflated ego had failed to consider. I wasn't just a successful investment banker, I was damn good at my job. And 3 months ago, when I first noticed the signs, I'd started preparing for exactly this moment. I pulled out my phone and dialed my lawyer, Margaret Chen. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "It's done," I said simply. He took the bait. Margaret's voice was crisp and professional. "Everything in place? Just like we planned." "He thinks he cleaned out the trust fund, but," I smiled, feeling the first real spark of satisfaction since James dropped his bombshell, "but he has no idea about the offshore accounts, or the shell company, or the fact that I've been documenting every questionable transaction he's made in the last 6 months." There was a pause, then Margaret chuckled. "You really are brilliant, you know that? When you came to me with suspicions about James, I thought you were being paranoid, but you saw it coming." I had. The signs were there if you knew where to look. The sudden interest in cryptocurrency, the new offshore clients, the way he'd started asking pointed questions about our investment portfolio. James thought he was being clever, But 15 years in investment banking had taught me to spot patterns. So I'd prepared, quietly, methodically. I'd moved most of our assets into new accounts he couldn't access, created a paper trail of his suspicious activities, set up a trap that would spring the moment he tried to clean out what he thought was our main trust fund. "How long until he figures it out?" Margaret asked. I glanced at my watch. "The fake trust fund transfer should clear in about an hour. Once he tries to access it, the fraud alert will trigger, and all his recent transactions will be flagged for review." Margaret sounded impressed. "You've really thought of everything." "Not everything. I hadn't thought about how empty our apartment would feel. Hadn't prepared for the ache in my chest when I looked at our wedding photo still hanging in the hallway. 15 years was a long time to love someone, even if they turned out to be a stranger in the end. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're so lucky James wants to be with me. Don't worry, I'll take good care of him. Ashley." Of course she'd get my number from him. I deleted the message without responding. The next few hours passed in a blur. I methodically went through our apartment, gathering James's remaining belongings into boxes, his favorite coffee mug, the ridiculously expensive golf clubs I'd bought him for Christmas, the framed law degree I'd helped him earn by working extra hours to pay his tuition. Each item felt heavy with memories, with promises now broken. By midnight, I'd filled 6 boxes. They sat by the door like sentries, guarding the remains of my marriage. Then my phone exploded with notifications. First came the angry text from James, "What the hell did you do?" Then 3 missed calls. Finally, an email, his rage evident even in the subject line, "You will regret this." I poured myself a fresh glass of wine, careful to step around the stain from the broken one, and settled in to read his tirade. The email was exactly what I'd expected. Threats of legal action, accusations of manipulation, demands that I fix this immediately or face consequences. Classic James, always believing he held all the cards. I typed out a simple reply: "I suggest you check your own accounts, specifically, the transfers you've been making to Ashley's personal account for the last 3 months, the ones coded as business expenses but sent through your private server. I'm sure the Bar Association would be very interested in those." His response came seconds later: "You're bluffing." I wasn't. I had everything, every transaction, every coded email, every falsified expense report. I'd watched him dig his own grave for months, collecting evidence while he was distracted by his midlife crisis and his young girlfriend. Another text from Ashley popped up: "James is really upset. What did you do to him? This is so toxic." I blocked her number. The doorman called up to inform me that James was in the lobby, demanding to be let up. I declined. Let him stew overnight. Tomorrow would be soon enough to begin dismantling the life we'd built together. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked tired, but there was something else there too, a strength I hadn't noticed before, maybe hadn't needed until now. I thought about the day James and I met, both young and ambitious, believing we'd take on the world together. We had, in a way, we'd built something remarkable. I just hadn't realized he'd been planning his exit strategy while I was planning our future. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Margaret: "Everything's in motion. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be interesting." She was right. Tomorrow would be the day James discovered exactly what happened when you underestimated your wife. But for now, I needed rest. I crawled into our king-sized bed, my bed now, and stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city below. 15 years of memories echoed through the empty apartment, but for the first time since James walked out, I didn't feel like I was drowning in them. Instead, I felt something unexpected: anticipation. Because tomorrow, James would learn that his carefully planned escape with his young girlfriend wasn't going to go quite the way he'd imagined. Tomorrow, he'd discover that the woman he'd dismissed as predictable and suffocating had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Tomorrow, the real games would begin. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and over 30 text messages. James had been busy. His messages devolved from angry demands to desperate pleas as the night wore on, ending with a final text at 4:37 a.m. "We need to talk, please." I took my time getting ready, selecting a crisp white blazer and my favorite Louboutins. If I was going to watch my husband's world implode, I wanted to look impeccable doing it. Margaret called while I was doing my makeup. "Are you ready for this? He's been calling my office since 6 a.m. "I'm ready," I said, applying a final coat of red lipstick. "Is everything in place?" "The bank has frozen all the suspicious transfers. The Bar Association received our anonymous tip about his creative accounting, and that private investigator's report you commissioned. It's devastating." I smiled at my reflection. "Perfect. Time to end this. The law firm of Mitchell Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. James had insisted on the location when we first opened it, claiming the view helped close deals. I hadn't set foot in the building since I'd first suspected his affair, but I still had my key card. Some things he'd forgotten to take away. When I stepped off the elevator, the office was in chaos, staff huddled in corners, whispering. Ashley was nowhere to be seen, but her desk had been cleared out. James's office door was closed, blinds drawn. Mrs. Mitchell, his secretary, Linda, rushed over. She'd been with us since the beginning, had watched us build this firm from nothing. He's been asking for you all morning. It's bad. I know, Linda, I said gently. Why don't you take an early lunch? This might get uncomfortable. She nodded gratefully and grabbed her purse. As she passed, she squeezed my arm. For what it's worth, I never liked her. Too obvious with those short skirts and giggling. I approached James's office, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Without knocking, I pushed open the door. The great James Mitchell looked like hell. His perfectly styled hair was a mess, his expensive shirt wrinkled. He sat behind his massive desk, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. "What did you do?" he demanded as soon as he saw me. "The accounts are frozen. The Bar Association is asking questions. Even my personal cards are being declined." I sat down across from him, crossing my legs calmly. "I protected myself. Something you taught me, actually. Remember when you said every good lawyer has a contingency plan? This isn't protecting yourself," he snarled. "This is sabotage. You've ruined everything." "No, James, you did that when you decided to sleep with your assistant and steal our money." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through messages. "Speaking of Ashley, have you talked to her this morning? Since her bank flagged those transfers as potential fraud?" His face paled. "You wouldn't." "I already did. Turns out, moving firm money through personal accounts to pay your girlfriend looks a lot like embezzlement, especially when you code it as business expenses." He slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. "How long have you known?" "About Ashley? 3 months. About the money? Longer. I'm an investment banker." "James, did you really think I wouldn't notice strange transfers and offshore accounts?" "Rebecca, we can fix this," he said, leaning forward. His voice took on that persuasive tone he used in court. "We'll tear up the divorce papers. I'll end things with Ashley. We can go back to Dash." "Back to what?" I cut him off. "Back to you lying to me? Back to me pretending I don't know who you really are." I stood up, smoothing my blazer. "No, James, we're not going back. In fact, I'm here to discuss the future of Mitchell Associates." His eyes narrowed. "What about it?" I smiled. The same smile he'd given me yesterday when he thought he'd won. "Check your email. You'll find some interesting documents from our biggest clients. They're not happy about the rumors of financial impropriety. Most of them are taking their business elsewhere." "You can't do this," he whispered. "This firm is my life. Our life." I corrected him. "We built it together, remember? With my connections, my trust fund to get it started. And now? Now it's just another asset to be divided in the divorce." His phone buzzed, probably Ashley realizing her gravy train had derailed. He ignored it, staring at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why go through all this? You could have just divorced me." I leaned across his desk, meeting his eyes. "Because you thought I was weak, predictable. You thought you could discard 15 years of marriage and walk away with everything we built. I needed you to understand exactly who you were walking away from." As if on cue, Linda appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Mitchell? There are some gentlemen here from the Bar Association. They're asking about an ethics complaint." James's face crumpled. His perfectly planned escape was falling apart, piece by piece. The money he thought he'd secured? Frozen. The girlfriend he'd risked everything for? Gone radio silent once the cash dried up. The reputation he'd spent years building? About to be scrutinized by his peers. "You'll never get away with this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I gathered my purse, preparing to leave him to face the consequences of his choices. "I already have." "Oh, and James? Ashley posted some interesting photos last night. You might want to check her Instagram. Apparently, she's already found someone new, someone whose accounts aren't frozen." I walked out of his office, head high, leaving him to deal with the Bar Association investigators. The staff watched me go, their expressions a mix of awe and sympathy. They'd figure out soon enough that Mitchell Associates would survive just under new management. Outside, the summer air felt clean and fresh. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Just got the preliminary divorce agreement drafted. You're going to like it." I smiled, thinking about the future stretching out before me. The firm would need restructuring, clients would need reassuring, but for the first time in months, I felt truly free. That evening, I returned to my apartment. The boxes of James's things still sat by the door, but they no longer felt heavy with memories. They were just boxes, filled with the belongings of a man who had underestimated his wife. I poured myself a glass of wine, carefully, this time, and walked out onto the balcony. The city sparkled below, full of possibilities. My phone had been quiet for hours. James was probably too busy dealing with the ethics investigation to harass me further. A text came through from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, Ashley." I almost laughed. Sorry she got caught. Probably. Sorry the money dried up. Sorry she'd bet on the wrong horse. I blocked her number again and turned back to the view. Somewhere out there, James was realizing that his perfect escape plan had backfired spectacularly. His young girlfriend had vanished, his assets were frozen, and his professional reputation was in tatters. Meanwhile, I had emerged stronger than ever. The firm would survive under my leadership. The trust fund he'd tried to drain was safely secured, and I had finally shed the role of perfect, predictable wife. 3 months later, I sat across from James one last time, signing our divorce papers. He looked older, tired. The ethics investigation had resulted in a suspension of his law license. Ashley, true to form, was already engaged to someone else, a fact she'd announced on social media with gleeful abandon. "I never saw it coming," he said quietly as we finished signing. "Any of it. I thought I knew you." "That was your mistake," I replied, gathering my papers. "You saw what you wanted to see, the supportive wife, the reliable partner. You forgot that I'm also a woman who knows her worth." I stood to leave, but he called after me, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry, not just for Ashley, but for underestimating you, for thinking I could outsmart you." I paused at the door, looking back at the man I'd once loved. "Goodbye, James, I hope she was worth it." The door clicked shut behind me, echoing with finality. In my purse, my phone buzzed with work notifications, client meetings to schedule, decisions to make. Life went on. That night, I finally cleaned up the wine stain from the kitchen floor. As I scrubbed, I thought about the day James left, thinking he'd orchestrated the perfect exit. He hadn't realized he was actually setting himself up for the greatest fall of his life. Sometimes the perfect revenge isn't about getting even, it's about showing someone exactly what they lost and making sure they live with that knowledge forever. I never told James about the second offshore account, the one even Margaret didn't know about. Some secrets, after all, are better kept, just like some lessons are better learned the hard way. The wine stain finally faded, leaving no trace of that fateful day. Like James's presence in my life, it had seemed permanent at first, a mark that would never fade, but with enough patience, enough determination, anything can be erased. Well, almost anything. The lessons? Those I'd keep forever.